Welcome into part 3 of our Road to Rings of Power series covering the Lord of the Rings movies with me, the idiot, Taylor Schroll from Forte Catholic, talking to the master, Kaitlyn Facista from Tea with Tolkien. Hello, Kaitlyn.
That's me. Hi.
you don't want to also agree about me? You want to...
No, I would never.
We know for those who watched the last video, I finally got one thing right. I was very proud. I have one point, and
yep.
then Kaitlyn has, 1,047. We're all keeping track. So this is part 3 and our final part as we go through the Lord of the Rings movies in preparation for Rings of Power, which is releasing a week from today. We're very, very excited. Very excited for the show, but I haven't interacted with anything Tolkien in a very long time until rewatching the movies, and I was like, I want Kaitlyn to walk me through this because I feel dumb and I want to know things. So, we're here. Have you enjoyed the first two, Kaitlyn? You told me one thing.
Yeah, it's fun.
You told me that talking to me makes you feel very smart, and I'm very proud of that.
Okay, so I've been hanging out with like the top Tolkien scholars in the world lately every time I go to one of these Rings of Power events. And so I feel so dumb because like they're so much smarter than me. So to be able to be like answering your questions straightforwardly, like it's very exciting. And I feel very smart.
Well, good. I'm so happy for both of us. For both of us. Okay, let's jump right in. So we're going to, like we've done with all the rest of them, these are essentially just my notes that I had, notes that I had as I chronologically walked through Return of the King, which was the longest by far. 4 hours that I put into this movie, Kaitlyn. 4 hours. That's the most show prep I've done for any video or podcast I've ever recorded in my life.
It should have been longer, though. There was so much that didn't make it into the movie. Even still.
I probably would have
should have been a 6-movie trilogy.
Well, or Amazon can just make a bunch of shows or something. So
yeah, 5 seasons.
Yeah,
the second age.
Okay, here's my first question.
Okay.
When we saw it in the last movie, but I didn't really have questions about it because there wasn't much going on. Christopher Lee had it. Oh, Saruman. I learned that it was called. I was like, well, it was very funny. Here was my note, and then later on, I went back and fixed it. I said, what is the circle eye thing that Pippin looks at? I learned later that it's called a palantir. Like what?
Yes.
What is it? Like, I know like what it does because we see what it does. I just don't understand why or how.
So there are 7 seeing stones, and they are likely created by Feanor himself, who is the guy that made the Silmarils, and he's also Galadriel's uncle. And they gave the
Is he a star or a bird now?
He's just dead.
Oh, good. That's much easier.
Yeah. So the Palantiri is the plural, and they gave the user the ability to communicate across distances. And the word Palantir literally means far seeing. So it's like the original like cell phones, basically. And they had them in different realms. And so like the kings in different areas could kind of communicate through them, and they weren't evil to begin with. They were actually used for good, but because Sauron kind of like, I think he has at least one of them, he's able to manipulate what the person who uses it sees. And so Denethor also has one, and I think we see that in this movie a lot. He has one, and he's obsessed with it, and he falls into despair because he believes everything that he sees on it wholeheartedly, and it's all skewed, which reminds us of when we go on Twitter and we think the whole world is burning and everything's lost, but it actually isn't. But it's just kind of, it presents a really depressing reality.
Or if you go on Instagram, you think everybody's lives are perfect. Either way.
Yeah. 7 apps, 7 Palantir.
Yeah. That's very funny. 7 apps to rule them all.
Right.
Oh, that's really funny. The App Store is the One Ring. It owns all of the apps.
Basically.
Apple. Okay.
Apple.
So I have a lot of questions about Arwen and Éowyn and all the ladies in the story that all have the same name. It's very confusing.
Right.
The first of which being Elrond is talking to his daughter when she's having this conversation about like, I want to be mortal. I want to stay with Aragorn. I want to stay and help the people. Throughout this conversation, Elrond's trying to convince her to, to come with him or whatever. And then but then at the end of the conversation, he realizes, I guess, that she's going to stay. And he's like, okay, now I'll reforge the sword that will make Aragorn and the king. And I'm like, why now? Like, why didn't you give him this when they set off at the beginning of the Fellowship? Like, what was the impetus for him to be like, okay, now I'll forge this sword?
Yeah, that's just totally a movie thing. They must have done it for dramatic effect, because they reforged the sword after the Council of Elrond when they should.
Yes, so, thank you. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah. So when they set out from Rivendell in the beginning, Aragorn has that sword, and he has it for the whole time, which makes sense. Like, I don't know why you'd send him out without a sword. Like,
right.
Crazy.
It's like, I, Elrond, deem that he can now be king because my daughter's dying. I'm like, what?
Well, and then, so like the whole idea of her wanting to stay and marry him, that's already been dealt with beforehand too. And he's kind of like, well, all right, you can marry my daughter, but she's not going to marry any guy. You've got to, get to your throne and become the king that you're meant to be, and then fine. Because that's why they don't get married until at the very end of the movie, once everything has been settled. Yeah.
It was just so strange. So I feel like that's another point for me, that I found something that didn't make sense. And
Good job.
I did it. Okay.
Yes,
I'm only 1,045 behind now. Okay. One interesting thing, just an interesting quote for me, was Gandalf talking about the Hobbit's quest. Here's what he says: "There never was much hope, only a fool's hope." And I thought that was fascinating because, like, obviously Tolkien, being a Catholic and hope being one of the, faith, hope, and love, these are the three greatest things. And like, me as a person, I always kind of feel like I'm lacking in hope. Like, I feel like a lot of the other good Christian people around me have a lot more hope that things will change and things will get better than I do. But so, like, hearing Gandalf say this, where, like, this was a huge part of the story. Like, you're 3 movies in, or a year-ish into the quest or whatever. And he's like, there really never was much hope that a hobbit would make it to Mount Doom and throw the ring in. It actually, ironically enough, gave me hope that, like, maybe I do have some hope, because that's kind of how I feel about something. It's like, maybe it'll happen. Maybe, like, it was always kind of a fool's hope. I don't know. That line really stuck out to me.
It's also, I think, a really good line, because back in the Two Towers, when they're talking to Saruman's like mocking them, and he's basically saying that it was a fool's hope and calling Gandalf a fool. So for Gandalf to then take that in his humility and be like, there wasn't a lot of hope, but we still have hope, that adds a lot to it as well. And it's kind of just the whole thing of, like, I think the main power in the Lord of the Rings is that it's the small and unassuming people who do end up moving things forward and are able to conquer great evil. And they do it with as much hope as they have. But they, like, if you think about it, like, it really is. It sounds goofy. Like, you would think that sending a big army would be the proper thing to do. But to send someone so small and unassuming, it does seem very foolish. But that's kind of the way about, like, Christ dying on the cross too. Like, it seems foolish that he would give himself up like that. But that's what works.
Yeah. It was like the most, like, Catholic line in all of this that I found. And I really really liked it. Speaking of redemption, you just mentioned Jesus, but Pippin getting his redemption, and Gandalf allowing Pippin to get his redemption after looking in the Palantir and, like, essentially screwing everything up, and then Gandalf has to, like, save him, and he gets split from Merry and all the rest of them. Like, he screwed up, and he realizes they screwed up, and he's so sorry. But then Gandalf looking to him and being like, "Hey, can you go up and light the beacon?" Which always reminds me of Mulan, like lighting, like, the Great Wall of China, which is, like, it's very funny because it's like, I know it from Mulan. So, Mulan stole it from Tolkien, but Tolkien's totally stole it from the Great Wall of China, which I think is ironic because that's what Mulan is. It's just very funny. They're all working together.
Circular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like, the fact that, like, Gandalf invited him, or asked him to go do it was just really cool. I liked that moment a lot.
Well, and I feel like up until this point, you have Pippin who kind of feels useless the whole quest. And so he finally has something to do. And it's really cool because obviously it was bad for him to take the Palantir, but in doing so, they actually learn about Sauron's plans. So it's kind of like this happy fault idea where they actually have an advantage now after that. Even though it also does cause problems, they have a lot more insight into his plans. And so it does work out for the good in the end, which like everything does in Tolkien.
Yeah. All right. I have another bone to pick.
All right.
It's about Arwen.
Okay.
Elrond just shows up and he's like, Arwen is dying. And I went and rewound it multiple times. I guess you can't talk rewinding now. We're not winding anything. I pushed the back button a lot because what Elrond says essentially like, as Sauron's power is growing, her power is weakening. Like she's dying. Like, so the stronger Sauron is getting, she is dying. But then the next sentence he says, her life is tied to the life of the ring. So Sauron's power is growing. So if Sauron gets too powerful, she'll die. But then also, if they throw the ring in and destroy the ring, she'll die. And then at the end, she's just fully alive. And I'm like, what is happening?
And another thing that the movie does too is so she has, Aragorn has that little necklace that she gives to him.
Yeah.
And it almost makes it seem like her life is somehow bound up in the necklace, which I don't really get because it's just a necklace. As far as I know, it's not magical. But I think what they're trying to do in the movies is just emphasize that she's chosen mortality. And so the fact that she's dying maybe doesn't mean she's actively dying, but it just means she's going to die, which most elves don't. So for Elrond, he would probably be really freaked out. But I kind of feel like that was just another kind of weird movie thing that they were doing to try to convey her choice, and her choice had been made.
Yeah. It was just a weird, like, and I guess that kind of makes sense because it came off as like a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, no matter what you do, if Sauron wins, she's dead. If you win because the ring gets thrown in, she's dead. And it's like kind of showing her, I guess it's showing her mortality, but then her just showing up at the end of the movie, I'm like, she's fine.
Right. It's like, well, yeah, either way, she's going to die. She's going to die if it rains, and she's going to die if the sun comes out, you know, like,
right, yeah.
It's just like, I think it's kind of also trying to show like her fate is bound up with Aragorn's because she's planning to like live a happy married life with him. And obviously if Sauron wins, she's already chosen her path and kind of bound herself to him. So she'll suffer a lot more, but either way, she's going to die.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So it's one of those things. It's like, I get it, but also it's kind of muddy.
Wrong, but yeah, it's a little it seems like one of those things where they're trying to convey something really complex to the viewer in a simple way that becomes a little bit more confusing.
Boo. Okay. I have questions about Aragorn now. So
okay,
this movie is called The Return of the King. I asked you last time, like, why is Aragorn so, important when Sauron's scared of him, right? But this time I was like, why isn't Aragorn already king? Like, why was he a ranger? Why was he gone? When did the line of kings break? Like, I don't understand why he wasn't just like already king in Gondor.
I think that's because he needed to be so after the death of Isildur, his heirs were kind of kept hidden and safe in Rivendell, where Elrond is. And they were kind of, it was kind of something like they didn't think it was quite time yet. And they were building I wouldn't say like building their strength, but they're just like waiting for the right time. And I think if he would have tried to come back before Sauron had been defeated, well, even in the books, like he doesn't want to come back because I feel like he doesn't think it's like his right moment. It's almost like a lot of times in scripture, like Jesus is like, he's like, this isn't my time yet. I'm not ready to come, as the, I don't know, whatever. He's not coming fully yet because his quest isn't done. Like he hasn't earned the right to be king, I guess, because even though he has it by blood, he's not like there yet. And I don't think it would be fitting for him to try and just like assume the throne without really doing anything to earn it, I guess.
So it's been, if I'm putting 2 and 2 together from other things you've taught me, so Isildur was 3,000 years ago. So they've been in hiding. This line of kings has been in hiding for 3,000 years.
Basically, yeah. I mean, there were kings for a while, but eventually Gondor kind of fell and the line of kings ended, and then that's when the stewards took over. But I don't think it wasn't for this whole Third Age.
Oh, okay.
Just for a while.
I gotcha. Yeah. It was just like, he seemed pretty kingly from the moment we met him. And I was like, nobody else from this line was kingly. Like it was just kind of one of those things. I was like, okay, what are we doing here?
All these pieces are moving. We have to wait till the right time. Now is the right time, apparently.
Gotcha. The time is now. Okay, it's like
Right.
It's like hiding Harry Potter with the Dursleys, except living with the elves is way better than living with the Dursleys.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure Aragorn didn't live in a cupboard under the stairs.
Oh my gosh, no. Yeah.
All right, more about Aragorn. His love triangle makes me super uncomfy. First of all, it's very confusing with Arwen and Éowyn. But every time he's with, I get them so confused. Every time he's with the human girl, I'm like,
that's Éowyn. She's the blonde one.
Like, stop talking to her. You're in love with Galadriel's daughter or whatever, whoever she is. Leave her alone.
Daughter. Yeah, I think the problem is that Aragorn is just like so charming and chivalrous that like anyone who's around him can't help but falling in love with him.
Oh, I know the
and
feeling.
He's almost like one of those guys who like doesn't even realize how they're acting. Like I feel like people will have a friend and the friends are just like really friendly and it comes off as that they're being flirtatious, and like once you get to know them, you're like, well, that's just how they act. But that seems like how he's acting, because he's always saying like real sweet stuff about Éowyn. And everyone around is like, like, what's this going on? And she totally thinks he's like falling for her. And she's like, oh, this will be great. We'll get married and whatever. And then he's like, well, actually, I'm not really available. Kind of like it's very ridiculous. Like he needed to just like step back a little bit, stop talking so much and stop being so nice to her.
Yeah. Don't be nice anymore to the gold diggers.
Just keep your mouth shut. Like, just don't talk to her. Like if you're gonna be this like charming with her, just like stop.
Yeah, the whole thing was just like it was very weird to me. Very weird.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I think the point of that, I guess, was to demonstrate just to like build Éowyn's character and show how she responded to things and kind of how hard her life was, so that then when she does end up with Faramir, you're like, oh, this is so great. Kind of, I don't know.
See, to me, that made me, it made her feel gold digger, like a gold digger. Because she's like, oh, I can't have the king, so I'll go have the heir to Rohan. I was like, come on.
Yeah, that's not really in the movie, but it's really Faramir who's pursuing her. And she's like, ugh. Not this guy. I only wanted Aragorn, and if I can't have Aragorn, I'd rather just die in battle. And he's like, come on, Éowyn, don't you see that I really like you? Couldn't you be happy with me? She's like, ugh. And then after a while, she's like, oh, okay. But it takes a while.
I'll settle for the future king of Rohan. Fine.
Yeah, I've gone. Yeah, so he actually is, so she's from Rohan, and he's from Gondor. And so in the end of that, he's the prince of one of the realms of Gondor. Oh, so she doesn't end up too bad.
Poor thing. It was just all very weird. I was like, why is this? I feel like there's missing pieces for the books or something, because I was like, this happened all so quickly. Sure. Yeah.
I feel like there's so few women in the Lord of the Rings, though, that they were like, a female character. We have to involve her as much as possible. So maybe that's kind of how it ended up going.
Yeah, and I think it's because, like, myself being married. It's like, oh, I have female friends, but I'm not like touching their face.
Yeah. I also think like, I mean, they weren't married yet, but it was basically like betrothed to Arwen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very like, just what are you doing? Like,
yeah, there's a line between like being nice and being kind. It's like, you said like the people that are like, oh, nice and kind of flirtatious, whatever. It's like,
yeah,
I can be like that. So it's like I've had to like kind of step away. It's like, oh, I feel like this is, maybe weird vibes or whatever. And I'm like, I can see it. You got to rock away, Aragorn.
You're like, whoops.
Yeah, it's very funny.
Yeah, but I think it's just Aragorn is like so kingly and just like very chivalrous that he doesn't mean to, but everyone just falls in love with him, I guess.
He's like, I wonder if it's legal if I have one elf wife and one human wife. Is that fine?
Yeah, and his elf wife is like several thousands of years old, and then he's 87 or so, and then Eowyn's like probably in her 20s. So it's just this massive age gap triangle happening.
Yeah, you just made it way creepier than I thought it was.
There you go.
All right. In that case, moving on. All right. One of my reflections as I was watching was when I was a kid. I watched it twice. I watched it when I was like a teenager, and then I watched it in my 20s, and then I watched it, in preparation for this series. And both of the first times, I was like, all I want to be is Legolas. Like, he's so cool. He's gorgeous. He's incredibly athletic. It's like I was an athlete growing up.
Surf on a shield.
Yeah, he can surf on an elephant. That was my favorite thing. It was like, oh, it's not elephant, it's Oliphant. I'm like, that's
right.
I kept looking for it. I was like, Timothy Oliphant? Like, I was very confused. It's like, why is he fighting for the bad guys?
Right.
But I just connected so much with Legolas, and like not saying that I was Legolas, but like I wanted to be him, right? And now I had
his hair, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Oh, to be fair, I'd take anybody's hair in this story. But he was the one I wanted to be. He was cool. He was kind of quippy. He was, one of the best fighters and cool with the bow and arrow and stuff. But then this time I was like, oh, like, no, I think I want to be Aragorn, right? Like, that's the person that I want to be, the kingly, the leader, the self-sacrifice, like all that kind of stuff. I was like, it was just very funny that like I went immediately from Legolas to Aragorn, like being like, I didn't care about Aragorn at all, really. The first couple times I watched it, I just wanted to be Legolas, and now I'm like, I want to be Aragorn now.
I think that's just like the progression of maturity, because I feel like everyone I know had a crush on Legolas in like junior high. And then as they grow up, they're like, actually, Aragorn. That's he's more of a kind of guy. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh man. So I'm good. I'm getting. I like what you're saying is I'm progressing, just not as fast as you with your crushes on the guys from Lord of the Rings.
On Faramir?
Yeah. Yeah, because that's what you were saying. It was funny because my wife was watching Return of the King with me, and she was like, all having a crush over Faramir, and I was like, and then that's what you said. You said you were Legolas, and then Aragorn, and then Faramir. So I guess when I grow up, when I get a little bit more mature,
then your wife will have a crush on you.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe if I get any of their hair, she'll have a crush on me again.
Though.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so funny. Okay, a couple more things here in our Return of the King little recap here. When the dead army, so the green people, the dead army that Aragorn brings back. People. Yeah. So they were like, oh, we're cursed because we ran when Gondor needed help. When was that? I'm so like involved with the timeline now as we prepare for Rings of Power. How long ago did they run into the mountains? How long have they been dead?
This was also towards the end of the Second Age.
Woo-hoo! I thought so.
Yes. So I don't know if we'll get to see this. I'm assuming. They were called to fight against Sauron, and they just fled to the mountains instead. And they were called by Isildur. And so since Aragorn is the heir of Isildur, that's why he has the authority to command them to fulfill their oaths that they had abandoned forever ago.
It's cool because I kind of figured it was that connection because of the Isildur connection, but it didn't click until you saying that they didn't fight against Sauron, and then what did they do? They fought against Sauron like 3,000 years later. Like, that's really cool. That's really, really cool.
Yeah. So they get their own little redemption arc, kind of.
Yeah. So Battle of Minas Tirith happens, And I'm like, the movie's over, right? No, there's an hour and a half left, Kaitlyn. The big final battle that I thought, there's an hour and a half left.
And if you're reading the books, it's like in the middle of the book, the ring is destroyed. And then you keep going forever after that.
So
there
crazy.
are so many loose ends that have to be tied up.
Yeah, it's wild. So I have a few more notes. So it was so funny because we do the whole battle of Minas Tirith and then it flashes back to Frodo. I'm like, oh, I forgot about him. We hadn't heard from him in an hour, It's so funny.
Like,
so
there's this guy.
yeah, I guess he's kind of important or whatever.
Yeah.
So he goes into the spider den thing with
Shelob's web.
Shelob, yep. Which is very, very funny. You and I talked about Shelob on my podcast years ago in regards to the video games that came out because she was a very pretty lady in those games and now she's a very ugly spider.
I saw that. I was like, what in the world?
It's so funny.
People are mad about Rings of Power, but like, did they not see that video game?
Yeah, it was very funny. It was funny because I think you called in our first video of this series, you called Rings of Power like good fan fiction. So I was like, oh, were the video games bad fan fiction? It's very funny.
Play the video game, so I guess I couldn't say for sure, but I don't really get that whole beautiful Shelob kind of thing.
Yeah, it was very funny because I was playing the game and I was like, oh, she's very pretty. And then I watched this movie. I was like, she's terrifying and hideous.
That reminds me of Beowulf Beowulf is the one where there's Grendel and his mother is like this old hag lady. But then in the Beowulf movie that came out with Angelina Jolie, she's like beautiful, dripping with gold. Like that was one of those things where you're just like, what?
She's on the cusp of old hag. It's okay.
Okay.
But okay, so in Shelob's den, Frodo's like about to die. And then just out of nowhere, Galadriel just appears. She seems to pick Frodo up and like lead him on. It was so strange and out of context.
That's kind of like a dream he's having though.
So in his dream, this random elf that he met once shows up and gives him strength, and then he gets up and runs away. It was so strange and out of context.
Okay, so back in the Fellowship of the Ring, when they're leaving Lothlorien, where Galadriel lives, she gives them each a gift. She gives him the phial of Galadriel, which is that little star glass. And so in the star glass, this is like probably the coolest thing of the Lord of the Rings. In the glass is the light of Eärendil, which is Elrond's dad, who's a star now.
Got it.
And so the light of Eärendil holds the light of a Silmaril, and the Silmarils hold the light of the two trees, which like lit the world before the sun and the moon. And so Shelob, who is like a giant spider demon, she's a descendant of this other spider demon named Ungoliant, and Ungoliant is the one who kills the two trees. So it's almost like he's bringing the light that Shelob's ancestor tried to destroy. He's bringing this light with him to fight against Shelob. So it's like this really cool connection that like it's almost like the whole history of the world flashes before your eyes when you're reading this part. But so this is the gift from Galadriel, and he's able to use it. So it's kind of like, it's not like she's actually appearing to him. He's having like a flashback of when she gives it to him. And it's kind of trying to remind the audience, don't forget he has this light. And then he's able to like find the strength, and he holds up the star glass and is able to get through it.
Expecto Patronum.
No.
Yes, it's exactly what it was
No.
like. But that it's funny because you were like, oh, it's like a flashback to help the audience remember. I clearly didn't. So it didn't help me at all. It made me more confused. Like, where'd she come from? But like now hearing you talk about like the history and stuff, like now I get it, So I think like book readers and scholars would get that moment, but idiots like me are like, what the hell just happened?
That's probably one of those moments where they're like, we got to put this in for the fans.
Right. And then for us, we're like, okay.
I think the hope is that you'd be like, what's this? I should read the books.
Or what's this? I'm just going to talk to Kaitlyn about it.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Not everybody has a Kaitlyn in their life. Everybody should,
I guess
though.
everyone does now that We're on YouTube.
There you go. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Back to Frodo and Sam. Frodo says to Sam, "The ring is my burden." But my wife was watching it, and like this was when Sam had the ring. Whenever he didn't trust Gollum and all this stuff, they split up. And Sam has the ring, and Sam seems perfectly fine with the ring. Like just kind of like Frodo did at the beginning. Like he hasn't had the ring, so it hasn't like started corrupting him at all. And so I just found it weird because Frodo is like, the ring is my burden, but Sam's perfectly fine with it. So it's like, why not let your friend share in your burdens?
Right.
Yeah.
So Sam actually is a little bit tempted. I mean, we see I guess doesn't really show it in the books too much, but it's really sweet. So Sam is a gardener, and the way that he's tempted by the ring is like, I could have the biggest, best garden in the world.
What a nerd.
So it's like he's tempted to become like a lord of his own and have a big, big giant, the world as his garden kind of. So he's definitely tempted by the ring. But again, the way that the ring works is that if you take it under like evil circumstances, the way Gollum did, it has a much quicker effect on you. And because Sam took it out of love for Frodo, because he thought Frodo was dead, it's not able to sway him as much, even though it does tempt him. But then the way that Frodo, I think partially Frodo is wanting it back because he's kind of obsessed with it at this point. He's like, this is my burden. You got to give it back to me. But he also, now that he has been burdened by it for so long, he does realize how it basically is going to cost him his life. And so he doesn't want that to happen to Sam. He recognizes that the ring was given to him. And so it's like fate that gave it to him. So he realizes it is his responsibility. So it's like kind of a twofold.
Yeah, it's interesting because I hadn't thought about that second part, that how, especially knowing how the movie ends, is how Frodo essentially rides off into sunset and Sam gets to live a whole full life. And so I guess I didn't see it that way. I kind of looked at it as Frodo being selfish and kind of like Gollum-ish, like it's mine, give it back to me or whatever. Like a way to get it back. But I guess I didn't think about how like, oh, we're so close. We've come this far. I don't want you to have to deal with it. I didn't see it as like a friendly thing, but I guess
I'd say like 50-50 probably.
Yeah. That does make me feel a lot better about it, because it's like, oh yeah, like you don't want your friend to suffer. That's actually really good. You mentioned it earlier, but we get to the part with Aragorn and the necklace breaking from Arwen. I can't remember.
Arwen's necklace.
Arwen, yeah. So that's not a thing for the books. I was just very confused about.
It's just a dream, isn't it? He like has a dream that it breaks or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think that's really anything.
Yeah, it was just very weird. It was like, it's broken, and now she's dying, and he has it. I was just very confused.
Then it's almost like, okay, well, is he gonna end up with Éowyn then if she's just over here dying?
Right? Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know about that.
He's like, I'll marry her for a few days, and then she'll die, and I'll marry Faramir's girlfriend.
Right? She'll be alive for a lot longer because she's so young.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, here's my question. Everybody has a question. I know that Tolkien people hate this question.
Okay.
My question's a little bit different than the one that people don't like. Okay. Mine isn't. My question is not, why didn't the hobbits just ride the eagles to Mount Doom? That's not my question. That's the one that pisses people off. Mine is, where the hell did they come from in the first place? We haven't heard anything about them. And then, like, we don't see Gandalf call them. We don't see anything. They just show up and start fighting. I'm like, where did that come from?
Yeah, this is another one of those things where if you read the Silmarillion, you're like, oh, these eagles, they're helping out all the time. Because the eagles are kind of like a servant of Manwë, who's another one of the Valar, like the god beings. And they are intervening like left and right throughout all of these stories. And so if you've read a lot more Tolkien, you're like, oh, there they are. I see the eagles all the time. It makes a little more sense.
But they weren't there for 3 whole movies.
Yeah. Yeah. But the 3 whole movies take place over like a year and a half. And in the thousands of years of history of Middle Earth, they're there pretty frequently.
It was just so random. It was so random.
Yeah.
I was just like, what is going on? Like, because like the last time something big like that happened, connected to Gandalf, it was like the Balrog, and he leaves, and then he comes back, and now he's Gandalf the White, and like he disappears every now and then. It's just like in Harry Potter, like Dumbledore would disappear for times and then come back, and something cool would happen. So it's like there wasn't even like a time that like Gandalf disappeared. Like, oh, let me go ask my friends for help. It's just no, they just showed up randomly.
Yeah, that's just another one of those movie things that movies can only be so long, and if they added another 15 minutes of eagle explanations, you would have been like, this movie's too long.
It was already too long. You might as well.
They should have just, I don't know if we'll ever get a Lord of the Rings TV series, but there would probably be a lot more eagle explanations if we did.
It was very funny. I realized because it was my first just like stream of consciousness notes, like where the hell did they come from? And it was funny because like I know that like I think you've told me other Tolkien people are like, oh, why didn't the eagles just carry the hobbits? Like, shut up, it's not how it works. It's very funny to have a different eagle problem. I thought it was very clever of myself.
Yeah, well I think we're gonna get to see these eagles in the Rings of Power.
Yay! So hooray!
That'll be fun.
Last 2 questions. And then I'll give you the final word, and then we'll sign off for the last time ever. So sad.
Goodbye forever.
Yeah, we'll never speak again. You'll be tired of me. I think it's Galadriel. It's one of the elves at the end. I think it was Galadriel. But she says, the time of the 3 rings has ended. And I don't get why it's 3. We've talked about the 1 ring. We've talked about a bunch of rings. Like there's way more than 3. Why does she say the time of the 3 rings has ended?
So you remember there's 3 rings for the Elven Kings?
Yeah.
You remember those?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Those are the rings she's talking about because the 3 of the elves there are 3 Elven rings and they still have those rings. And while the 1 ring existed, those rings had power. But after the 1 ring was destroyed, the 3 rings didn't have these magical powers anymore. And they had been using the 3 rings to kind of ward off decay and to protect the elven realms. And so now that the 1 ring has been destroyed, they can't really help Middle Earth anymore because they don't have like these powers. And so that's why they're leaving now.
Okay. It makes their leaving feel less selfish. It actually has like a point. And it also makes the statement of the 3 rings of it sound less selfish because it's just like, oh, our 3 are gone, so we're leaving.
I can't believe you destroyed the 1 ring. Now we can't use our 3 special rings anymore.
It does make sense because the whole them leaving did feel kind of selfish, but now like knowing the reason was that like they had fulfilled their duty. That actually kind of now I go to my rest or whatever. And
it's just like the time of the elves is over. Now it's time, and that's kind of how it's always been throughout the histories. Like the elves had a time when it was they were the ones to kind of rule the earth, and they knew that there was going to be like a fading, and then men were going to take over. Because if you look at Middle Earth like it's our own Earth, which is kind of meant to be, we obviously don't have elves around anymore. So you could say that we're like, ages past when the elves left. And that's why we don't remember them or have any elves around. So it's kind of like now is the time of men.
Gotcha. You heard it here first. Kaitlyn Facista thinks elves used to exist. All right, one more serious question and then one final silly question.
Okay.
I don't get why Frodo left at the end. You've explained to me that they're going to these undying lands and they're, the elves are going to live forever. So it's like kind of like their heaven or whatever. Frodo's a hobbit. Why is he leaving? He's very young. He has a full life ahead of him. He's the hero of Middle Earth. Why doesn't he stay and just be like, yeah, you're the best,
Well, okay, so Frodo gets to go to the Undying Lands as a little treat because he was a ring bearer, but he also gets to go because he was injured. He was stabbed by the Morgul blade. Do you remember when the Nazgul stabbed him?
Yeah.
And that wound never really heals because it was like a magical sword he was stabbed with. So he's unable to heal from that. And he's not able to live a happy, full life like Sam is. And so it's kind of just like a gift that's given to him where he's able to go there and rest and heal for the rest of his life. So he won't get to live forever because it's not like, it's called the Undying Lands, but that's because the people who don't die live there. It's not the land itself that makes you undying. And so he's able to go there and just like have, it's like he's going to like a nice retirement home kind of where he just gets to live out the rest of his days in peace. And it's just like a nice gift that they give to him.
Yeah. I think what I was thinking when I was watching it before you explained to me what the Undying Lands were, I think I was thinking that it was like heaven. So I just kind of thought he was like euthanizing himself. And it was very strange. So I was like, okay, if it's an actual other place and it's undying because the people that are going there are undying, if he's going to go there and live a retirement life, a nice, happy life, and then die later, I feel fine about it.
Yeah. So it's like for Galadriel, she's going home because this is where she's from. And it's like a final return for her. But for Frodo, it's like he's given this grace kind of as like a thank you for saving the world kind of thing. You get to have some peace, not be bothered by your neighbors all the time.
Yeah. All right. Final silly question. It bothered me that Aragorn and all of the people bowed down to 4 hobbits. It was very stupid.
I'm trying to remember if that's even in the books or not. I mean, it's just like meant to be like, thanks guys kind of thing. I didn't think it was that goofy, but I actually didn't realize that people thought it was that goofy until like this week. I saw people on Twitter being like, I hated that scene. And I was like, oh, all right.
So Aragorn, there's levels to it. Aragorn was just crowned king. He's the rightful king. He's very clearly earned it. Good for him. If he wants to bow down to Frodo, because Frodo's the one that saved everybody, that's perfectly fine. I'm fine with that. And then maybe even Sam, because Sam was there and he carried him up. But the fact that Aragorn, the king of all of Gondor, is bowing down to Merry and Pippin is ridiculous.
Well, Merry did help kill the Witch King of Angmar, though. The Nazgul King.
So many, and that's what my wife was saying too. I was like, so many people there did great things and killed great people. Nobody's bowing down to Gandalf. Nobody's bowing down to Billy Butcher from The Boys. Nobody's bowing down to all these other people that did great stuff. It bothered me.
Well, that's just your opinion, I guess.
Yeah, I just don't like kings bowing down to people who barely helped. When other people helped more. Oh my gosh,
this is so disrespectful. I can't believe you say that.
They're not real, Kaitlyn. I can say whatever I want about them. It's not like Pippin's gonna DM me. I can't believe you just said that.
Just wait. Someone's gonna make an account and be like, I'm Pippin.
The actor comes for me. It'd be very funny.
Yeah, Billy Boyd's gonna be like, how dare you?
Okay. Well, you're the master here. Those are all my questions, all my thoughts. Final thoughts on this movie, and then final thoughts on Lord of the Rings.
You have a lot of good thoughts. Good job.
Hey.
Thanks for coming up with so many good questions. It was very fun. I think the Lord of the Rings movies are pretty good. The books are better. So if you want to read the books, I recommend it.
I just complained that I had to spend 10 hours watching these movies. You know how long it would take me to read the books, Kaitlyn?
Just get the audiobook. Taylor, come on. You're like driving all the time.
I am.
Just get the audiobook.
Yes, ma'am. Final thoughts on this movie. Any other things that I missed, especially connected to Rings of Power?
I don't think so. I think this is just a good movie. There's not a... Well, so, in this movie, there's the White Tree of Gondor.
Yeah.
There's a White Tree in Numenor, too. So just keep an eye out for that. That's like the White Tree in Gondor is a descendant of that tree in Numenor, and you're going to get to see how it came from Numenor to Gondor. So just keep your eye out for the tree. So you can be like, that's the tree. Oh my gosh. So that's probably the biggest connection. And I guess the whole idea of Aragorn's heritage, we're going to get to meet Aragorn's ancestors in the show. So we'll see.
Cool. I'm looking forward to it. It comes out next week on Amazon Prime. If you did not yet, go back and watch our first 2 videos on the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers. I'm Taylor Schroll, host of Forte Catholic. We have a weekly podcast where we just talk about faith and comedy. And then we also have stuff, a Catholic perspective series that is, kind of a faith perspective on other hits from Disney and Marvel and those sorts of things. Kaitlyn, why don't you tell the people where they can connect with you about more Tolkien stuff?
Yeah, so I run a website called Tea with Tolkien, and you can find it at teawithtolkien.com. You can find me on Twitter at Tea with Tolkien. And we run a free book club. That's kind of the main thing we do. So if you would like to read more Tolkien, you can join our free book club by checking out our website. And other than that, I just have a lot of thoughts on Tolkien. So you can find them anywhere you can find me.
Awesome. Yeah, I am going to be very interested in your thoughts as Rings of Power continues to roll out. And maybe,
very nervous.
Maybe, just maybe, our friendship isn't over, and maybe we'll talk about Rings of Power after it comes out at some point.
I'm sure, yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, Kaitlyn, thank you for doing this with me. I learned a lot, and I know people have already been responding to our first 2 videos and say that they have learned a lot and they've enjoyed this. I think, honestly, people just enjoy me looking like an idiot. It's been very fun for everybody. So thanks for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, thanks for coming up with the idea. This is really fun.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we hope that you enjoyed our series. Enjoy Rings of Power. Make sure that you hit subscribe right here because, we might come back at some point and talk about the Rings of Power. Thank you guys for watching. God bless. Peace.